Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 16th of December of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev, about new things, new details about the common situation in Ukraine. And probably one of the most important updates is that according to Ukrainian sources, a new service from the recruitment government authorities is gaining popularity in Ukraine. So if you have money, for example, and if you have business, you can pay these, let's say, recruitment offices, of course, unofficially, and they will, let's say, destroy the business or destroy the life of your competitor or your enemy. So this is the kind of kind of story in Ukraine right now. Also, we got another interesting update is that no matter that the United States of America currently is unable to send Ukrainians more money, there are a lot of sources where the Ukrainians still have possibilities to get some funds. For example, the World Bank will provide another 1.34 billion to Ukraine. Furthermore, other sources are saying that Netherlands is also going to send another €500 million to Ukraine, so that's a lot of money, obviously. Also, interesting things is coming from the Starokonstantinov. If you remember, on the 14th of December, when Putin had his speech, Russia was attacking the territory of Ukraine with Kinzhal missiles, and we got today some details about those attacks. And according to information we have, of course, we don't have any geolocated proofs or confirmations that as a result of those strikes, the Russians managed to kill or destroy up to 28 high-ranking officers of the armed forces of Ukraine and around 12 NATO officers in Starokonstantinov. Of course, it's very difficult to believe this information without any geolocations, but these are the rumors that currently the Russian sources talk about. Now we are moving to northern part of Ukraine, to Chernigov area and so on. We got a lot of very interesting details. The Russians are saying that, and the Ukrainians are saying that during the previous night the Russians attacked the city with Geran drones, and they also got very difficult and very terrible video from the city. On this sense, you can see significant number of Ukrainian women who were standing in line to get fresh, free bread. So as you can see, this is the situation and this is the life in Ukraine, when people need to stay in line to get bread in Ukraine, who has the biggest possibilities to sell grain all over the world. So very difficult situation. Now we are moving to the border. We are moving to the border between Sumi and, let's say, Kursk area, where we got update that significant number, not significant, but 6 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered. And they were basically abandoned by the Ukrainian military authorities, and they took a decision to surrender just to save their lives. According to this video, according to them, as you can see, they were talking something on camera. They were saying that, asking the Ukrainians to stop fighting, to surrender, to choose Russian side, and so on. But the sources and the author of this video, who made this video or who had connection with the person who made this video, noted in his article that the first thing that these soldiers asked the Russians when they were captured was to give them some food. Once again, very difficult situation in Ukraine. Of course, from one side we can say that these soldiers were abandoned by their military authorities, but from the other side we know that, according to Russian sources and Ukrainian sources, the Russians intensified activity of their reconnaissance and commandos group along the border with Russian Federation. So maybe that guys were basically captured, or the Russians made an ambush and they didn't have any other option but to surrender, and after that they made this video just to save their life. It's normal situation. Now we are moving to Kharkiv, and we got also very interesting updates. And this video, for example, was published by 228th Battalion of the 127th Territorial Defense Brigade. That main base is located in Kharkiv. As you can see, significant number of soldiers, and they were talking about things about war, about Ukrainian authorities, and the Ukrainian military authorities lied them, and that they were receiving criminal orders. So basically, according to them, the Ukrainian military authorities took a decision basically to destroy this brigade and to kill everyone there. And they're saying that some of their forces, some of their groups were sent to Bahmut and the soldiers that from their brigade that were sent to Bahmut didn't know that they were sent to Bahmut. So a lot of casualties, a lot of losses, and they refused to continue to follow the orders until there's going to be any investigation and until the military authorities of Ukraine will find those who are responsible for this situation. Of course, we understand them. I understand these guys because their main position in Kharkiv, and nobody wants to be sent in Avdiivka or in Bahmut direction, because for example from Bahmut direction today we got a very terrifying video of another evacuation of dead Ukrainian soldiers from the combat line. According to information we have, this is the video of evacuation of dead soldiers of 56 motorized brigade, and you know that this is the brigade who is currently responsible for defending the cities like Grigorievka, Bogdanovka, like the main road between Chasov Yar and Khromovo. So the area where the Russians during the previous days had significant progress. And if you remember, this area that we just discussed, the villages like Grigorievka, Orekhovo-Vasilievka, Grigorievka, this territory used to be under defense and under responsibilities of 56 and 57th Brigade. Also, there were lots of brigades from, let's say, 77th and many others, but recently the Ukrainians took a decision to redeploy 57th Brigade from this territory to the northern Kupiansk direction. And obviously, after that redeployment, the gap appeared in this area, and the Russians took a decision to use the situation, and the Ukrainians were forced to use just one brigade instead of 2 or 3 to protect this territory. Obviously, there is a gap, there are lots of gaps along the front line, and this is the reason of the losses, and this is the reason of that video. So we understand why the forces of 228th Battalion didn't want to be sent to Bahmut direction to replace some other forces. We will not start with Bahmut Artyomovsk direction. We are going to talk first of all about Novomykhailivka, where we got significant number of very interesting details and updates. And first we're going to talk about Novomykhailivka. According to the Russians, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 90 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. The level of losses is very heavy. The Russians continue their movement from the north, from Marinka along the tree lines to the south in direction of Novomykhailivka. The Russians are using broad frontline attacks, significant number of forces. The Russians every single day capture more and more territories, capture more and more strongholds, Ukrainian positions and so on. Today we got another video how as a result of clashes the Russians capture another stronghold of Ukrainian forces. This video was geolocated softly. I just know, according to the author of this video, this attack, this clearing operation was made by the 33rd Motor Rifle Regiment, and according to disposition of forces, as I know, this regiment is located exactly in the area of Novomykhailivka. So I added this icon softly because we know that the Russians are moving somewhere here, and as a result of this attack and clearing operation, the Russians managed to capture a stronghold and few Ukrainian soldiers. Everything is okay with them, no worries. So we know that when talking about the northern direction, the main Russian goal is to get this line. As soon as they get this line, the entire battle would change its state, and the Russians will do whatever they like with the northern direction of Novomykhailivka. When talking about the southern direction, we got also lots of very interesting updates. We got another geolocated video how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian forces on the eastern edge of the village. Basically, the Russians were bombing ruins that left from the city. Very heavy fire, and this is like a signal, a sign that the Russians are planning to start offensive operation, ground offensive operation very soon. And this is not the only factor that tell us about the Russian plans to start offensive operation on the ground. The most important updates are coming from the south. If you remember, during the previous video we have already discussed that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians, according to some mappers, managed to establish control over this territory. At least Deep State map, Syriac map confirms this information. But the Russian military blogger Ribber, for example, today reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians also managed to establish control over the graveyard or Symmetry. So I'm talking about this territory. So according to the Russian sources, this territory, this part of Novomykhailivka was also taken by the Russian by, let's say, evening 8 p.m. of the local time on the 16th of December. So we see that the situation is critical, and the Russians got almost the inside of the city from the central part, from the south central part, from the eastern part, from the southeastern part. So the Novomykhailivka is not half encircled. Obviously, there is still a lot of job to do. The Russians need probably to improve a little bit their positions on the southwestern part of the village. But anyway, the days of Novomykhailivka are numbered. Maybe not the days of Novomykhailivka, but let's say the days of before the beginning of the ground operation are numbered. And obviously, the Russians soon will make few attempts to attack the village from the south, from the east, with one purpose: to reduce the Ukrainian forces, to reduce the number of Ukrainian forces that can be sent from Novomykhailivka to stabilize the front line on the north of this village. So the Russians need to do this. They need to pin down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to have any possibilities to move to the north. So basically, as I understand, within the next few days, the Russians will face no barriers and no any activity from the Ukrainians from the north. And those forces that are located on the north are the only forces that the Russians will fight with, according to my understanding of the situation. Also, the Russians published another video of another Lancet strike somewhere in the vicinity of Ganovka, Veselый Gai. On this video, we can see how the Russians managed to discover the Ukrainian T-64 tank, and as a result of Lancet strike, that T-64 was destroyed. Very interesting video. Everything is about the same story. And now let's once again answer the most important question: what are the plans of the Russians? And obviously, by taking Novomykhailivka, the Russians will be able to take under control this small artillery salient or artillery pocket or this cauldron or whatever. And after that, the Russians, the most important, will be able to enter residential area. As you can see, there are a lot of fields, and to move on the open space is very difficult. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's difficult. Let's say when talking about Avdiivka, fields are not good because they are mined. When talking about Novomykhailivka, fields also are not good, but somewhere in other place fields maybe might good. Let's say after Marinka falls, fields is better than to fight in Marinka. But anyway, the Russians after Novomykhailivka will be able to enter residential area, and then they will be able to move one city, one village after another, always under cover of some structures, buildings, basements, and so on. And this is going to be a very long storming operation during the entire winter, maybe 3-4 months. The Russians will need to take control over this territory, and the first main goal is to get this interception of road. And obviously, as long as the Russians move along this line, the villages that located below this line and on the top of this line will be collapsed, like Maximilianovka, Vadiana. Finally, according to the Russians, Vuhledar will be collapsed as well. When talking about Vuhledar, the Russians published some geolocations of artillery bombardments, of toss flamethrower strikes in this area. The Russians are trying to pin down the Ukrainians and not to allow them also to redeploy some reserves from Vuhledar in direction of Novomykhailivka. So I expect few fake attacks from the Russian side, and the main purpose of upcoming attacks is to slow down the Ukrainians and not to allow them to redeploy the forces of 72nd Mechanized Brigade from Vuhledar to Novomykhailivka. Obviously, the Russians will have losses and maybe will be even defeated, but this is not the main goal, to capture any let's say city. The main goal is not to allow the Ukrainians to be flexible and to redeploy forces. Few updates about Marinka. Just once again, the Ukrainians during the previous day managed to try to counterattack the Russian forces on the northwestern part of the village, but the Ukrainians were defeated, and the Ukrainians sent a significant number of infantry, significant number of armored vehicles, but the Ukrainians basically, maybe they did know that those buildings were already captured by the Russians, and the Ukrainians got into artillery pocket and were destroyed with very heavy artillery fire, under very heavy artillery fire. Significant number of dead soldiers, and the Russians managed to improve and to prove their presence and their control over this territory. Obviously, there are a few days, the days of the western, northern part of Marinka are numbered either. So obviously, within the next few days, the Russians will continue advancing, trying to complete the story of the village. And the Russians do have chances to do this, and the reason is that this area currently is under protection of 46 Air Mobile Brigade that is new on this direction. The 79th currently is located on the line between Pobeda and Novomykhailivka, and this is their area of responsibilities, and most of the parts of that brigade were redeployed to the south. And once again, 46 is new to this area, and obviously they are fighting with experienced 5th motorized brigade Applaud. They are fighting with 103rd Rifle Regiment, so they are facing very powerful and experienced brigade, and obviously they don't have chances to fight with the veterans in this area. Now we are moving to Avdiivka. We also have some updates from this territory. The Russians made another attempt to attack the line between Severna and Toninka with very powerful armored fist. On this video we can see another Russian attack with significant number of tanks that were moving somewhere in the fields on the south of Toninka and Severna, on the north of Vadiane. Yet this video doesn't give us any information regarding the results of that attack, but so we're using this video just to show that the front line is not sleeping in this area, that the Russians almost every single day make more new actions with the purpose to establish control and to tighten the Avdiivka news. When talking about the southern part of Avdiivka, we haven't received nothing special, nothing new in comparison with the previous video. The separate sources are saying about the Russian further progress on the line of Kirova Street and Yasinovata line. Furthermore, we got some geolocations of Russian FPV drone strikes against the Tsarskaya Khota fortification, so we might consider these attacks, those attacks, as the something like FPV drone preparation before the ground operation. But anyway, I don't think that the Russians are going to attack and storm Tsarskaya Khota from the south, or let's say air defense base from the south. I'm not sure about this, because I suppose that the Russians will try to continue their attacks from industrial area in this direction, because they don't need to, there are no fortifications as we can find on the south of air defense base X and Tsarskaya Khota. There are just residential area with significant number of buildings, probably with some number of Ukrainians, and the main Russian goal and plan is to get probably this territory. So as you can see, there is not so much, not so many. And if the Russians are able to capture this territory, obviously we understand that everything that located on the south of these streets will be collapsed, either Tsarskaya Khota fortification, air defense base. When talking about northern direction, we haven't received anything else in comparison with the previous video we discussed. The Ukrainians tried to counterattack, but the Russians, as I understand, managed to dig in deeper and to establish full control over this territory. And now the Ukrainians need a lot of forces, a lot of manpower to force the Russians to step back. Obviously, the Russians continue the regrouping. I'm not sure how long they need to complete these things, but obviously within the next 48 hours we can expect more attacks from the Russian side in direction of western part of Stepova and Berdichi. Now we are moving to Bahmut Artyomov's direction. We got a lot of updates. As we discussed, we got today just a video of evacuation of dead soldiers of 56th Brigade who had significant losses during the battle for Bogdanovka and Grigorovka. Also, the sources are saying that Ukrainians have significant problems with artillery rounds, and according to information we have, there is a growing shortage of shells in Ukraine. Raised BBC with reference to the Ukrainian military near Artyomovsk, and the gap from Russia is 4-5 times. So imagine yourself, if the Russians can use, let's say, 100 shells per day and they're using more, the Ukrainians can use just 20. So there are no chances for the Ukrainians to hold this territory for a very long time. Obviously, sooner or later they will be collapsed and will be forced to step back. For now, we haven't received any updates about any progress from the Russian side or new geolocated videos with the previous, but we know that there is a progress in direction of Ivanovskaya. there is a progress in direction of Chernobyl's residential area, and today, right before I start making this video, we got some unconfirmed updates that ex-Wagner forces with Special Unit Akhmat, so I'm talking about Concord and Special Unit Akhmat, managed to clear completely the central part of this residential area. Probably tomorrow in the next update we're going to receive some geolocated confirmations, so we see that the Russians are getting closer and closer to Ivanovska itself, and there are very high risks that Ukrainian forces in Avdiivka and Klishchiivka will be encircled and basically will be forced to step back without any possibilities. They will step back without even the bats, without fightings, because there are no chances for them. Or we know the Ukrainians, maybe they will try to keep them just to win some time, but the question is how much the Ukrainians are able to win. When talking about Solidar area, we haven't received anything in comparison with the previous video. According to Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 290 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, including 1 tank and 1 artillery system. Once again, the Russians continue their movements in direction of Vuhledar along the railways, and the previous few days they were concentrated on the shortening of their front line, trying to move through the fields with infantry and armored vehicles. So this is the possible progress of the Russians during the previous days, and the Russians are doing everything they can to encircle Veselaya from 2 directions, from the west and from the east. And there are information that the Russians are moving further in direction of Razdolovka and are trying to advance further from Saka and Lancet in direction of Fedorovka. So as you can see, the situation for the Ukrainians on this front line is also not so good. When talking about Leman, no geolocations, just updates about heavy clashes. The Ukrainians lost 100 soldiers on this direction and 9 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. When talking about Kupiansk direction, the story almost the same. The Russians published just one video how the Ukrainians tried to evacuate their soldiers with M113 armored vehicle personal carrier, but that machine was destroyed as a result of anti-tank missile, but no changes on the ground. And about Sinkovka as well. During the previous days, 2 days in a row, we were receiving more and more updates about how the Russians were entering the village, but for today we got nothing. Probably there are very heavy clashes, the battle for initiative, and maybe tomorrow, the day after, we're going to start receiving some details about the battle. The only thing we got is another video from Udaya Diary. The day 30 started on 198 soldiers of losses, and at the end of the day, as a result of work of just one operator, the Ukrainians lost 204 soldiers. So basically we have crossed half a battalion losses for just of work of one operator. Significant losses. And now we are moving to Zaporozhye area. We got some updates from this territory. The Russians continue their offensive operation on the northern flank of Verbove, and as a result of few attacks, few operations in this area, the Ukrainians were forced to step back. The Russians made few ambushes, and after that they counterattacked with the forces. The Ukrainians were forced to step back from this direction. The entire Verbove operation, I believe that soon we will stop calling this Bradley Square or Zaporozhye area. I believe that we're going to call this area Rabotina Cake, because the Russians are trying to cut one small piece in this area after another. I'll remind you that just a few days ago we got some updates that as a result of Russian attack, they managed to establish control, let's say, over these small fields. After that, we got some geolocations in video that the Russians managed to cut this small field. The day after, we got another update about some Russian progress in this area. Today, we got update that the Russians managed to return control over these tree lines. So it's like a cake, and the Russians are cutting this cake for many pieces, hundreds of small pieces. Every single day, but another piece of this Bradley Rabotina cake the Russians are taking. And with this tempo, with this speed, maybe the Russians are not able to return control over this territory by the end of this year, but by the end of the winter, the Ukrainian progress in this area during Ukraine's greatest counteroffensive operation will be reduced till nothing, till Novomykhailivka. According to the Russian sources, as a result of offensive operation, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 50 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. When talking about Kherson, we haven't received a lot of updates, probably due to the bad weather. The Russians do have possibilities to bomb this territory with guided bombs, and lots of attacks, lots of bombardments took place in Kazatsk, Dardakamyanka, Berislav, just a regular military routine when the Russians try to discover the concentration of the Ukrainian forces and to destroy them. The same story about Krinky, but as you can see, no geolocations neither from the Russian nor from the Ukrainian side about any counterattacks, about any attempts to redeploy forces using boats from one side to another. And according to the sources, this is all about the bad weather in this area. The only thing we got is the video of Gerань strike in Kherson. According to the Ministry of Defense, as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 65 soldiers, 7 armored vehicles, and 5 artillery systems on Kherson direction. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.